Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. We've not been with you since Friday, but it seems like a long time. Chris McElwain is joining me alongside Sean Connolly all the way in from Australia. We're here for the match day coverage at Celtic versus Hibernian. And that's for the second time of the season. It's come around quickly already, Chris, right? 2 games back to back. But we do have a new addition in the squad. And he's sitting on the bench, the big man, Adam Idah. Exciting to see him making his second debut, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I think I said earlier in the week that I would actually, my initial reaction was more relief than excitement with Idah coming in. But you know what? Once the deal was done, and signed and sealed, and we saw him wearing the kit, I did feel quite excited about having him back, because the way Brendan Rodgers spoke about him and continues to speak about him is that he's a player that, in his eyes, has got a huge amount of potential. And actually, I'm keen to see what he's going to bring, not only to games like today, if he gets some minutes off the bench, which I hope he does, but actually to see how he's able to elevate his game in Europe, seeing what he can bring throughout the season, being that foil for Kyogo. Hey, you never know, we might even see the two of them playing up front together. Or, as we're seeing today, maybe we'll see Maeda out there alongside one of them as well. So I like the fact that even though we are essentially getting back to the position we were in at the end of last season in terms of squad players and squad depth at the moment, I'm keen to see now Rodgers' second season since he came back. The team, I think, is starting to build more of an identity now. I think pre-season demonstrated that. I think certainly first half last week was some of the best football I'd seen in a while. So I think now with Idah back, with Bernardo back, hopefully with a few more additions before the end of the window, we'll start to see much more of an established Brendan Rodgers team. Hopefully we get to see some good football, lots of goals, dominance, certainly in domestic league, and a good showing in Europe. So yeah, I'm feeling excited. I'm looking forward to this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same. And I think that the one disappointment, obviously we're buzzing that Adam Idah is in there, Sean, but unfortunately Kyogo doesn't make it. And that is, Idah's came in right at the nick of time, to be honest with you. But it's so disappointing to see that Kyogo's missing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of surprise, because he normally, if it's a recurring shoulder injury, he does normally get up for it pretty quickly. I suspect if this was a game at Ibrox or Hampden, then he might have been available. But and that's no disrespect to Hibs. We have good options here. I think maybe there's also an aspect of Maeda's probably been doing training as a striker this week for whatever pre-match practice they've had. So that's even with Idah coming in on whatever day he made it in, Thursday, whatever day he made it into training. I suspect that it's probably too late in the week for all the prep we've done. So it's, go with Maeda rather than stick Idah in there, even though he was preferred. And I also was surprised in the sense that when Maeda, when Kyogo got injured last week, Maeda stayed on the wing and Mikey Johnson came on. But I guess Mikey Johnson's still suffering from his concussion as well, because he's not on the bench.
I know, that's a good point, but you're right. So we're down a couple of bodies, and that was the big concern, Chris, coming out of that period of the transfer window where we're having to play competitive games and we hadn't really strengthened the squad. Some would argue we still haven't. We've just got back to ground zero. A couple of injuries, and then what it does is it opens an opportunity for someone like young Francis Turley. I'm delighted to see him on the bench. Often it's this type of circumstance that leads to that, Chris. But it's great to see the young guy on the bench. I think he deserves it. He done really well in the pre-season, didn't he?
Yeah, and listen, we've been crying out for youth to get a chance. Celtic's a difficult club for young players to get an opportunity because the stakes are so high week on week, right? It's very rare that we get what you'd consider a free hit game, because we're expected to win every game. We're expected to win every competition, certainly within our own support. So it's very, very difficult to give opportunities to young guys. Sometimes you hope if you're 3 or 4 goals up and there's a good number of minutes left, you bring on one of the young players and they get the opportunity. And obviously the challenge is on young players like Turley to take the opportunity when it comes. Certainly today it's a cup game. but it's a cup game against Premier League opposition, essentially, because we're not playing a team from the lower leagues where maybe you are expected to dominate. I'm hoping we get another 90 minutes like the first 45 we had last week, or the first 60 we had last week. I'd like to see some free-flowing football, bit of dominance, get a few goals. Hopefully Kuhn can maintain his performance. Really keen to see what Maeda can do up front. I think it will depend on how Hibs play. I think if Hibs play as expansively and as pressing as they did last week, then I think there's going to be opportunities for Maeda to use his pace and his movement to exploit. With the delivery of Forrest and Kuhn either side of him, I'm hoping that then there'll be opportunities for Maeda to, for example, run in behind. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we set up today. But yeah, seeing a young boy like Turley on the bench, you kind of would love to see a bit of a Tony Watt moment, wouldn't you? Just where he comes on, first touch, nice breaking run and puts the ball into the net. Obviously, you'd want him to go on and build on that. And, unfortunately with Tony, his career stagnated and became a bit of a journeyman, which is a shame. But you're always hopeful that when you see a young player on the bench, especially one we've not seen a huge amount of, that you hope, there's maybe something there that'll come on, he'll seize the opportunity and we could have a star in the making, because we want the next James Forrest or the next Callum McGregor to eventually come through. So.
Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. And it's a conversation point we have quite a bit, Sean. You'll have noticed that in all the years that you've been involved with Acsom as well. And we've been talking about it through the pre-season due to the departure confirmed of one Rocco Vata, Klaxon alert, and the imminent departure of Daniel Kelly. And I think that the difference here, and it's a good point Chris makes, last season, guys like that were getting opportunities against the likes of Bucky Thistle and the Scottish. This is Hibs. And they weren't great last week, but they've caused us problems in seasons gone by. And I think it gives young Turley a boost to know that he's come in for these pre-season games, like a few of the lads have, and he's performed well. Obviously, negotiations have then been pretty swift on our return to Scotland. He signed a new deal. And it's almost as if you've been rewarded for your hard work, your efforts, and the fact that you've committed to this football club. This isn't just filling in the jerseys against lower league opposition. It's early in the season. We don't want a repeat of what happened last year in the League Cup and the young fellas on the bench. I think it's a great move.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him. I think he played yesterday though for the B team. So
you mentioned that, yeah.
I don't know that he'll get too many minutes. Whenever the B team game was, he was in the lineup. I don't remember when the actual date was. I was just glancing over at the Hibs team there, and it does, when you mentioned if they're going to be as expansive as last week, it looks based on the lineup that they're going to play a back three. So they've got three centre backs in the team, and they've taken out Milotnikov, who was one of their more attacking midfielders last week, and they've got Campbell in to replace him. So I'd say, but they've still got the kind of good boy that was up front that was a bit useless last week, the Ukrainian. So I guess they're kind of waiting to release Bowie later in the game. So it doesn't look like they're going to be expansive based on that lineup. It looks like it's going to be a low block. It looks like it's going to be try to maybe create something down the wings because they've still got Boyle in there, and they do have the wing backs that are decent enough, probably the strongest aspect of their team. But yeah, hopefully if we get the magic number is 3, isn't it, right? Like we saw that last week. We go 2-0 up pretty quickly, missed some chances, and even after in the second half, in the first 15 minutes, we missed some chances, and that really kind of puts the game on a knife edge for when Hibs do get even half chances. It's on a knife edge at that point. But when you get that third one, you can kind of relax, and that becomes Francis Turley territory. And look, if it's 2-1 going into the last 15 minutes, I don't think we'll see him. And that's the thing we've seen as well in the past. And it doesn't obviously flag up as much on our radar, but we do see things like Bosun Lava on the bench, and we're going in 1 goal up in the last 15 minutes. He doesn't see any time, right? It's more of a, if we're comfortable, let's go on. There's your chance. There's your reward for effort.
Yeah. And you said Francis Turley territory. It's also Jim Orr territory. He cannot enjoy a game of football until we're 3 goals up. That's the Oracle's view on modern football. But you're right. It often is. You throw them in once we're comfortable. I think the one time last season where there was a wee tested character was probably at Tynecastle, and Kelly was thrown in. And to be honest, I think that every time he was thrown a challenge, he rose to it. He overcame the challenge. But unfortunately, it's not resulted in him being a Celtic player this campaign. Look at that sponsor on the Hibs jersey, right? I remember the introduction of sponsors. C.R. Smith were Celtic's first, as you'll remember, and it was actually earlier in the 1980s. And
was that before? Was it after Ford? I thought
yeah,
Ford
it was before and after.
Before and after. Okay.
Yeah. Double glazing.
I was a kid.
Exactly. You're showing your age, or showing my age. Double glazing firm from Dunfermline. Oh, nice, clean fun. Now, Scottish team has Bevy on their jersey. And it's just like, come on, lads. Hey, let's try harder. Let's try harder to get something that's not a betting or an alcohol firm. And I'm not having a dig at Hibs. I know that Celtic have had it since when? 2003? After the UEFA Cup final, Carling. And since then, we have had Bevy or betting on our jerseys. That's something that I think should change at some point. There's a Hibs team, but we're going to be concentrating on the Celtic side. And we'll start at the back. Chris McIlwain. We haven't seen any new additions in the defence, but we have in the sticks, Joe Hart, obviously, the blessed Joe, is now on the telly with the likes of Alan Shearer and all that kind of stuff. But we've got Schmeichel, and I think that already he's one of these guys that he's accepted. You're looking at him going, right, solid. I know it's only 2 performances, but within those 2 games, I think what he's given us is a flavour of what he can bring to this football club, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, just big congratulations to Joe for making his match of the day debut. I watched it last night, and he's not out of place. You know, you sort of forget how articulate Big Joe is.
Well, Shearer's rotten. Can I just say that? Shearer gives you nothing.
It's rotten.
He gives you nothing, does he? Yeah. He's terrible.
I have to admit, I thought Big Joe held his own last night and did really well. So fair play to him. But yeah, you know, the funny thing is, Schmeichel's came in and. You know, there was praise and criticism, kind of equal measure. Obviously, praise because of his stature, you know, the type of career he's had, the fact that you know the manager's familiar with with the way he plays, etc. And it seemed like an obvious fit. But there's also the criticism of it's not a long-term signing. You know, he's you know, I think slightly older than Joe. Maybe I can't remember if he's slightly older, slightly younger.
Yes.
But that's you know, it's fair to say that he's approaching the twilight years of his career. But at the same time, modern day goalkeepers, you know, they're very fit. They can play into the latter part of the 30s. You know, he's a player who has continually played at a very high level and performed at a high level. What I've seen from Schmeichel so far, without seeing him making the spectacular saves, because we haven't really been under that much pressure in games so far. But probably the biggest element that I've been impressed with is he looks very, very comfortable with the ball at his feet, which is something that I would probably say Joe Hart was never that comfortable with the ball at his feet. I think he improved over time, but it was never one of his strengths, and there was always a few scary moments with the pass backs and trying to play it for the back. I think with Schmeichel, you seem to have a bit more confidence that he's comfortable in that aspect. And look, we know from his days at Leicester, we know from the days that, you know, the times that he played under Rodgers, that he's actually a really top shot stopper as well. I'm trying not to say that too fast, but he's really great at you know, 1-on-1 situations. So I think he's at least as good at. In fact, I would probably go the extra mile and say he's a slight upgrade on Joe Hart, and that's when you've had such a good goalkeeper in Hart, who's played such a huge part in the success over the past couple of seasons, to be able to replace that with a keeper of Schmeichel's quality is something we should appreciate, and I certainly do. So yeah, pleased to see him. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not seeing Sinisalo. There's a lot of teams who play, particularly down in England. I think Liverpool was a good example where they play a keeper like Kelleher in the cup competitions and keep their you know, their number one for the league games. I would have quite liked to have seen us do something similar, because I believe Sinisalo is a keeper with a lot of potential, and it'd be good to see him getting some minutes. But go back to my earlier point, there's no easy route for players to come into the team, because every game's a must-win for us. So we'll see how it goes. I'm sure Sinisalo will get his opportunities, but I certainly have full confidence in our goalkeeper. I think Schmeichel is a great signing.
It's a good point, because I think when we brought in Siegrist, you know, in Joe Hart's first season, second season, the plan was to give him that opportunity to play in the League Cup. We played the first 2 League Cup games and then disappeared from view. and of course never played again. That was the only 2 games he played for Celtic. So yeah, I get that absolutely. It would also be an opportunity, I think, for some of the young guys to come in a competitive game that means something. Now I know every game means something, but in terms of this League Cup, you know, it was such a disappointment last season to get bounced out at our first game, Sean, that you almost forget that was the first time ever we had lost a cup game under Brendan Rodgers. He'll be wanting to get back on the what would you call it? Back on the what? I was going to say the wagon. Back on the wagon, or back on the horse.
Traditionally, you would say back on the horse. Yes.
Back on the horse. There we go.
Gymnastics horse, I think, not the actual. Well, maybe it is the actual horse. I don't know. Maybe
back on the horse. Back on the horse. There we go.
And
and again, I don't know him as a character, but in terms of everything I've heard about him, players speaking about him, he is that type of person that leaves nothing to chance, Sean. He will be determined to get his cup record back on track in the League Cup today.
Yeah, and I remember we had we played poorly that day against Kilmarnock, and but even still, we did have that. We should have had that penalty late in the game when who's the winger? Haksabanovic went down, and it was a clear foul, I thought, and they kind of got away with that one. I'm actually just trying to pull up the team from that game to see kind of how far we've come in a year, and I'm struggling to find it, to be honest. But it'd be interesting.
That game, I'm just going to pluck this out of the old grey matter, right? Even though I can't remember if it's getting back on the wagon, that's something completely different. I'm sure that was maybe the only game actually that Lagerbielke and Nawrocki started. Would I be right in saying that? I'll have a look at that while you're chatting there, Sean, but I'm sure they two started.
An awful long time ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It was 1 year. It was 20th of August last year, so it was less than a year ago. Wow. I think I've just got it here. Okay, so let's see. Teams, if it comes up. We've got Joe Hart, Ralston, Nawrocki, Lagerbielke, Greg Taylor, and then O'Reilly, McGregor, and Holm in the middle. Abada, Furuhashi, and Maeda. So
still a strong team.
Strong team.
Side. Yeah.
Apart from maybe the centre backs. There's quite a change. And then Yang, Turnbull, and Haksabanovic came off the bench. The bench is not looking as strong. We had Bernabeu on the bench back then.
I think a decision was made that day, Sean, by Brendan that he would never play that central defensive partnership again.
Apparently so, because I don't know that they've ever played together again since then. But hopefully we do better this year. I don't know how the other teams are getting on. They're actually playing just now. I've seen that Hearts that was some result. Falkirk pumping them out, and then Spartans beating Ross County. So look, there's a couple of teams in the next round that will be desperate to get us. Falkirk and Spartans will want that game, and it could be. And no disrespect to any team, but it could be interesting because in the last few years it feels like it's been very Premiership heavy from what in the later rounds of the cups. You've not had many of these Gretna and Queen of the South kind of things going on. I know we played Cali Thistle in the cup final, but it just feels more Premiership heavy. It goes to the levels these days. But yeah, a couple upsets yesterday. Should be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So to run through the scores then, Aberdeen beat Queen's Park 1-0. Queen's Park, good, well-run outfit, actually. Dundee 6, Adria 1. Adrionians have been doing well, but they've taken a couple of pumpings recently from Dundee and Ayr United. Falkirk 2, Hearts 0. Get it up here. Spartans 1, Ross County 0. And Rangers 2, St George the Dill. Now, we don't focus on Rangers on this show, but what was going on yesterday after they won the kind of like second round of a League Cup game, Chris? It was all a bit embarrassing, was it not?
When they won the Champions League, the World Cup, and the World Championship all in one go, do you know what? I mean, like, I don't want to kick somebody when they're down.
I do.
Except when.
Why not?
Well, I was going to say, except when you. I mean, like, I always try and look at these things objectively, right? And I'll if you bear with me here, bear with me. But if you stick with me here, look, we know that every fan base has got its good folks and it's got its half-wits, right? And I always think, you know, if that was my club, if it was my club that was in this sort of position, you know, it's not a nice feeling. We've had it in the 90s. It wasn't nice. I remember being relatively young when that was happening, worrying, as a club I've supported, you know, through my childhood, still going to be there. So look, I wouldn't really wish that on a lot of people, you know. But the fact is, we came through it. They've suffered, they've gone down, been relegated, liquidated, came up as a new club, whatever. But see when you have to deal with things like the cutting of the allocation. And by the way, big shout out to Brendan Rodgers for calling that what it was.
Brilliant.
So, by the way, I want to say that.
Yeah,
we've not had a manager talk in such plain and simple and honest terms for a long time about that situation. So credit where it's due. I thought Brendan was great to call that out. But when you see things like you can see on the socials, the supporter liaison and disability access officer for St Johnstone getting physically assaulted and having a drum stolen off her by these absolute degenerate, inbred half-wits. Any sympathy that I want to have, any just trying to view things objectively disappears. Right? There is a toxic element to that fan base. There is a toxic element to that club. There is an us against everybody element to that club. And to be honest, there's no defending it. There's no defending it. So do you know what? Hell mend them. You know, they've put themselves in this situation. Everything that's happened is of their own making. They can't blame anyone else. So do you know what? I've heard people saying we need Rangers in the league. You know, the league would suffer if Rangers were to be liquidated again. But see, when you see things like that, you're just like, get rid of them. You know, just get them gone. The hell with them. So it's an emotional response to something that you should maybe view objectively. But when I see, a poor lady that's just there doing her job as a supporters liaison officer and get set upon. I'm sorry, I cannot. You legislate for that.
It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
The
thing is, there's a generic view, Chris, of people who don't have any skin in the game, who might be football fans. And we had a brilliant interview last week with Terry Christian, who obviously is based down south. And there is this generic view of a football fan. And when they're talking about Celtic, they invariably talk about Celtic and Rangers. And I think one of the biggest things on Friday, whilst we were actually on live, so we didn't have time to comment on Brendan Rodgers' comments, but we obviously watched them after the stream. It was just nail on head. That's what it was, because we had seen the usual generic nonsense coming out from the media, which obviously feeds the typical casual observer football fan from further afield into believing, Celtic and Rangers have an issue here. And Brendan Rodgers put them straight, Sean. It was straight talking, straight from the hip. And he was spot on, 100% saying what we were all feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, you're right. It very much, it does happen way too often. And it, like, my partner's American, so like my mom's talking to her at one point and says like, oh yeah, this Celtic Rangers thing, it's bad, and talks about all the the bigotry and the sectarianism, and I'm like, and I'm just kind of nodding, like, because I don't want to get in an argument with my mom. And then later on, she's like, "What's that about?" And I'm like, and I have to sit and explain, like, we get put together and it's not the same thing. And she's just kind of nodding, like, yeah. And I'm like, no, really, it's not. and it does come out that way to people that don't understand that we are the same, but we're not. Like, we play professional football in Scotland. We both are from Glasgow. There's not really much after that. That's kind of where the similarities end. The only difference between Rangers and Queen's Park is that Rangers are in the Premiership and Queen's Park are in the Championship. And that's where, and other than that, we probably actually have more in common with Queen's Park than we do with anyone across in Ibrox. So it's very, like, and it's a marketing ploy. SPFL are always going to market it as their biggest selling game. It's the most viewed game. So, but we have, beyond football, we have so little in common with them. It's scary.
Yeah, and that's where, when we started up a Celtic state of mind, it's that collective mindset that I think, was probably started back in the old Celtic Minded days. There's been a website, there's Celtic Minded books by Dr. Joe Bradley. And it's that acceptance also, as Chris says, every fan base has an element that maybe doesn't fit into what we would like to think is a Celtic state of mind. But yeah, completely poles apart, actually, if you ask me. And sometimes you've just got to inform people of that. I'm not going to say educate, but inform people who don't, realise, because they're being fed a line of propaganda through media. David Boyle was hoping to see Home today. Hopefully we'll see some minutes. I mean, he's certainly come through the comments made by Brendan Rodgers around him and Boston Lawal, who were getting talked up during the pre-season, and he tempered that chat, didn't he, with what he said. So hopefully he'll get some minutes today. Afternoon, Acsom team from Magnet 67. Let's do this. Are you in the Skylark bar? We need to know. That looks in your avatar like, where's Lawrence? Behind the bar? Let's do this, Celtic. Big performance and win, please. Hello, says Paddy Lavery. He's definitely in the Sky. That's the Skylark from a lovely Barcelona. I hope you're enjoying yourself, Paddy. Some good comments coming through now. We're going to start off with Stephen Sloan. Here we go. 12 days to go, and we're still no stronger from last season. It looks like we're actually trying to keep Rangers afloat. Our board seem to have no ambition. I get that frustration. I hear it a lot. I think we're going to do a big bit of business, unfortunately, in the last few days of the window, maybe even in the last day of the window. I think the English Premiership's kicked off, and a lot of people are observing that some of the bigger teams haven't actually made a lot of signings. So it's an issue across the board, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, I was talking to Mulman about this earlier, funnily enough, that I think there's a lot of teams down there that are under pressure for the financial fair play. I think they've overspent over recent seasons, and I think they're all trying to be strategic about the recruitment. And that's having a knock-on effect to teams outside of that league that are maybe trying to pick up players. Now, it could work in our favour. We could potentially get players for less money than they've been previously known to go for. But it does mean that business is a bit slower than maybe what we'd like. Now, it's very rare that I don't fully agree with what Stephen says. Generally in the comments, he usually makes some great points, and this one's no different. But the only thing I would take issue with is I do think we're a bit stronger than last season for one reason. And the reason is that it's our second season under the manager. We've had another pre-season. I think the team looks more connected than they did last season so far, based on what we've seen. Absolutely, under no circumstances do I believe that we don't need more recruits. We do. We absolutely do. So I do think we need another left back. I think we need a centre back. I think we probably need another striker, despite the fact we seem to be utilising Maeda as potentially the alternative option to Kyogo at the moment. And we could very well end up having to bring another midfielder in to replace O'Reilly at some stage. But I think overall this team, they look more comfortable under the manager. They look as though they're trying to find their identity on the park, and they're finding that. You've got guys like Kuhn who look like their confidence is up, their physicality is up, and he looks ready to make a meaningful contribution. And we've had the resurgence of James Forrest as well. So I do think we're stronger to a small extent than last season. But yeah, we've got to go and build on that, right? It's not going to be enough, particularly when we hit Europe. So we do want to see more recruits. So I'm right with Stephen on that. I think you're right, Paul John. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping, and I've got a little bit of confidence that we'll make some substantial moves in that transfer window.
Yeah, I hope you're right. Absolutely do. I mean, even if you just look at the corresponding fixture from last season, as Sean read out the team line, we're a stronger side now than we were back then by some distance, I would actually say. But George Robertson obviously tuned into the Terry Christian episode on This Is Acsom. Check it out on Friday night. By the way, some people say PJD is 10 foot tall and fires cannonballs out of his, let's say, derriere. PJD on the programme with Terry Christian. What it is, George, there was somebody out there who tried to manufacture a podcast war and started to call me the wee fella, but unfortunately for him, the old protein diet is kicking in. I would prefer to say my build is big boned, Sean, rather than fat. But thank you, George. Yes, I think it was the angle of the camera. These things can skew it slightly. But yes, thank you for tuning in. Terry was a great guest, absolutely brilliant. And because JP and I were on the show, invariably we went on a few tangents. But there's enough Celtic content in there for you to enjoy it. Go and check it out. Jungle Lion, after yesterday's shenanigans, now we know why Celtic gave them 0 tickets and proper order. Going back to some of the stuff Chris was talking about earlier. And by the way I'm looking at it just now, the comments made by Brendan Rodgers, the decision that's been made by Celtic, I think that within the game of football, they're looking at the scenario over Ibrox and they're thinking it's not going to be September, October before they get back into their own stadium. So loads and loads of discussions elsewhere for that particular situation. Mount Kadath, Rogers curveball. Buys a new striker and then plays Maida through the middle. I'm sure he would have done it earlier, but he didn't want the board to be content with the squad. Wouldn't put it past them. Some predictions then, Sean. Start with your good self.
I do think Hibs are going to absolutely low block it. So I think it could be a frustrating afternoon. I don't know. We're now into the third game of will Schmeichel make a save? We'll find out. I think it's pretty slim chance, to be honest. Maybe if Hibs come out late on, he might have a save to make. But 2-0, I think, unfortunately. Again, I think it'll be like 25 shots, but a lot of bodies in the way.
Yeah, absolutely happy with that if it comes to fruition. What about yourself, Chris?
I'm going to go with the Jim Moore comfort zone. I'm going to go with 3-0 to Celtic. I think I'm hoping we'll have a fairly fast start, maybe 2-0 up at half time, and then I'm hoping we either cameo towards the end will give us a wee debut goal.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to lay it on the line right now here, match day 3, every single home game. I'm predicting 4-0, and I'm going to start. I think, did I do that? Did I do that in the?
I did it last week. You went with 3.
4-0 at home. Every game we need to win 4-0. Right, there's my prediction. Thanks everybody for getting involved. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we will join you again at halftime, hopefully, to talk about an excellent first half of football. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Give us a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you to Chris McElwain and Sean Conley for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.